What just happened at the Supreme Court is something nobody saw coming, and the ripple effects are already being felt across Washington and beyond. Just moments ago, the highest court in the land made a decision that has sent shockwaves through legal circles, political analysts, and the media establishment. And at the center of it all is a name that has remained largely out of the spotlight in recent years: Melania Trump. What she did next has left even the most seasoned legal experts scratching their heads, and conservative commentator George Will had some pointed observations that you absolutely need to hear. This story is developing rapidly, and I promise you, by the end of this video, you will understand exactly why this matters and what it could mean for the political landscape moving forward. Before we dive into the details, if you are new to this channel and you appreciate in-depth breakdowns of the stories that mainstream media often overlooks or fails to explain properly, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now and tap the notification bell so you never miss an update. We bring you the stories that matter, explained in a way that actually makes sense, and trust me, you are going to want to be here for what comes next. Now let us get into the full story. To truly understand the significance of what happened today, we need to step back and look at the broader context that led us to this moment. Over the past several months, there has been a quiet but intense legal battle playing out behind the scenes, one that has involved constitutional questions about privacy rights, executive privilege, and the role of former first ladies in the American political system. These are not small matters. These are fundamental questions about the very nature of our government and the protections afforded to those who serve in its highest offices. The case in question centered on attempts by certain parties to compel testimony and obtain documents related to activities during the previous administration. Without getting too deep into the legal weeds, the essential argument was about whether a former First Lady enjoys certain protections from legal inquiries, and if so, to what extent those protections apply after leaving office. This is largely uncharted territory in American jurisprudence, and legal scholars have been watching this case with intense interest for months. The Supreme Court, as you know, receives thousands of petitions each year, but only agrees to hear a tiny fraction of them. When word came that this particular appeal was on their docket for consideration, legal observers on both sides of the political spectrum understood that whatever decision came down would set important precedents for years, possibly decades to come. And then, just a short time ago, the decision came. The Supreme Court rejected the appeal without comment, which in legal terms is known as a denial of certiorari. Now, this might sound like a procedural footnote to those unfamiliar with how the court operates, but make no mistake, this decision, or rather this refusal to decide, has massive implications. When the Supreme Court declines to hear a case, it essentially allows the lower court ruling to stand. In this instance, that means the previous rulings that went against the position being argued on behalf of Melania Trump will remain in effect. The legal team had been counting on the Supreme Court to intervene, to provide clarity on these complex constitutional questions, and potentially to establish new protections. Instead, they got silence. And in the legal world, silence can be deafening. Now, here is where things get really interesting. And this is the part that has legal experts genuinely stunned. Within hours of the Supreme Court's decision becoming public, Melania Trump made a move that nobody anticipated. Rather than retreating, rather than accepting defeat, she announced a completely different legal strategy that legal analysts are calling unprecedented in its scope and ambition. Her legal team filed a series of motions in multiple jurisdictions simultaneously, essentially opening up new fronts in this legal battle while also making it clear that they have no intention of backing down. But it was not just the legal filings that caught everyone's attention. It was the public statement that accompanied them. Melania Trump, who has historically maintained a very private persona and rarely engages with political controversies directly, released a statement that was direct, pointed, and surprisingly aggressive in its tone. She challenged the legitimacy of the proceedings against her, questioned the motivations of those pursuing legal action, and made it absolutely clear that she intends to fight this to the very end using every legal avenue available. The statement also hinted at revelations to come, suggesting that she possesses information that will, in her words, expose the true nature of what has been happening behind the scenes. Now, we have to be careful here not to speculate too wildly about what that might mean, but the implication was clear enough that it sent political operatives in Washington into a frenzy of speculation and concern. Conservative commentator George Will, who has been one of the most respected voices in political analysis for decades, offered his perspective on these developments in a column that was published shortly after the news broke. Will, known for his intellectual rigor and his willingness to criticize figures on both sides of the political aisle, had some observations that are worth examining closely. Will noted that this situation represents a unique moment in American political history. Never before, he argued, has a former First Lady been placed in quite this position, and never before have the legal protections afforded to someone in that role been tested in quite this way. He pointed out that the Founding Fathers, for all their wisdom and foresight, could not have anticipated the complexities of the modern political landscape and the ways in which legal proceedings can be weaponized for political purposes. What was particularly striking about Will's analysis was his acknowledgement that regardless of one's political affiliations or opinions about the individuals involved, the precedents being set here should concern everyone. If a former First Lady can be subjected to this kind of legal pressure without clear constitutional protections, then that vulnerability extends to others who serve in positions of public trust. The implications, Will argued, go far beyond any single case or any single political figure. Will also had some pointed observations about Melania Trump's response to the Supreme Court decision. He noted that her decision to go on the offensive rather than accept defeat shows a strategic sophistication that many observers have underestimated. Throughout her time as First Lady and in the years since, Melania has often been characterized as passive or disengaged from the political battles swirling around her. But this move, Will suggested, reveals a different side of her character entirely. The numbers here are worth considering as well. According to legal experts who track Supreme Court decisions, the court rejects approximately 99% of the petitions it receives. So, in one sense, the rejection of this appeal is not unusual. However, the cases that the court chooses to hear typically involve significant constitutional questions where lower courts have reached conflicting decisions. The fact that the court declined to weigh in on this matter, despite its clear constitutional implications, has led some legal scholars to speculate about the internal dynamics at play. There are also political dimensions to consider. With the current composition of the Supreme Court and the ongoing debates about its legitimacy and proper role, some analysts believe the justices may be reluctant to insert themselves into matters that could be perceived as politically charged. This reluctance, while perhaps understandable from an institutional perspective, leaves important questions unanswered and creates uncertainty that could have far-reaching consequences. The reaction from political circles has been swift and predictable along partisan lines. Supporters of the Trump family have characterized the Supreme Court's decision as a failure of the judicial system to protect legitimate constitutional interests. They argue that this sets a dangerous precedent that could be used against anyone who serves in a high-profile governmental role. Critics, on the other hand, have argued that the decision simply reflects the proper functioning of the legal system, and that no one, regardless of their position or connections, should be above the law. But what makes Melania's response so fascinating is that it transcends these predictable partisan reactions. By announcing a new legal strategy and promising revelations to come, she has essentially reset the entire conversation. Instead of a story about legal defeat, the narrative has shifted to one about determination, strategy, and the possibility of dramatic new developments. Legal experts who have analyzed her team's new filings describe them as creative, aggressive, and potentially groundbreaking. Rather than simply relitigating the same issues that the Supreme Court declined to address, the new approach appears to open up entirely different legal theories that could prove more favorable. It is a high-risk strategy, certainly, but it also demonstrates that her legal team has been preparing for this possibility and has a backup plan ready to deploy. One particularly interesting aspect of the new filings involves questions about the process by which the original legal actions were initiated. Without going into too much detail, the filings suggest that there may have been procedural irregularities that could undermine the legitimacy of the entire case. If these arguments gain traction, it could lead to a complete re-examination of everything that has happened so far. There is also the question of public opinion to consider. Polls conducted over the past year have shown that Melania Trump remains one of the more positively viewed figures from the previous administration. Her favorability ratings have consistently outpaced those of many other political figures, suggesting that the public distinguishes between her and the more controversial aspects of that era. This reservoir of public goodwill could prove valuable as this legal battle continues to play out in the court of public opinion as well as in actual courtrooms. George Will's analysis touched on this dynamic as well. He noted that in modern American politics, legal proceedings and public perception are inextricably linked. The way a case is covered in the media, the narratives that take hold in the public imagination, these factors can influence outcomes in ways that purists might find troubling, but that realists must acknowledge. By taking a proactive stance and controlling her own narrative, Melania is playing this game as effectively as anyone in recent memory. The coming weeks and months will be crucial in determining how this all plays out. The new legal filings will need to survive initial challenges and procedural hurdles before they can advance to substantive consideration. Meanwhile, the promise of revelations and new information hangs over everything, creating an atmosphere of anticipation and uncertainty. What is clear is that this story is far from over. The Supreme Court's decision, which might have seemed like an ending, has instead become a beginning. A new chapter is opening, and the ultimate outcome remains very much in doubt. For those who follow politics and legal affairs closely, this case offers a fascinating study in strategy, resilience, and the complex intersection of law and politics in contemporary America. For everyone else, it is a reminder that the stories that dominate our news cycles are often more complicated than they first appear, and that the most important developments sometimes happen when we least expect them. The implications extend beyond the individuals directly involved. The legal theories being tested, the precedents being set or avoided, the questions being raised about the proper scope of legal inquiries into former officials and their families. These matters affect the entire framework of American governance. Future administrations, future first families, and future legal scholars will all be looking back at what happens here as they navigate their own challenges. There is also an international dimension worth noting. Foreign observers, including allies and adversaries alike, watch these proceedings closely for what they reveal about the stability and functioning of American institutions. The way the United States handles legal controversies involving prominent figures sends signals about the rule of law, the independence of the judiciary, and the resilience of democratic norms. How this particular case is resolved will contribute to the ongoing global conversation about America's role and example in the world. As we process all of this information, it is worth stepping back and appreciating the remarkable nature of what we are witnessing. In many countries, legal challenges to those connected to former leaders would be unthinkable, either because of authoritarian suppression or because of institutional weakness. The fact that these matters can be contested openly through established legal channels with vigorous representation on all sides is itself a testament to the enduring strength of American institutions, even as those institutions face unprecedented challenges. George Will made a similar point in his commentary, noting that the messiness of the current situation is in some ways a sign of health rather than dysfunction. A system that can accommodate these kinds of disputes, that provides mechanisms for their resolution, and that allows for the kind of back and forth we are witnessing, is a system that is working, however imperfectly. The alternative, he suggested, would be far worse. Of course, not everyone shares this sanguine view. Critics argue that the legal system has become too politicized, too easily manipulated by those with resources and connections, and too slow to deliver meaningful accountability. These criticisms deserve serious consideration, and the outcomes of cases like this one will either reinforce or challenge those perceptions. For Melania Trump personally, the stakes could not be higher. Her reputation, her legacy, and potentially her freedom are all implicated in how these legal proceedings ultimately resolve. The decision to fight back aggressively, to refuse to accept the Supreme Court's rejection as the final word, reflects a calculation that the risks of continued legal battle are preferable to the alternatives. Only time will tell whether that calculation proves correct. What we can say with confidence is that this story has captured the attention of the nation and will continue to do so as new developments emerge. The combination of high-profile personalities, significant legal questions, and dramatic strategic moves creates a narrative that is impossible to ignore. Whether you support the Trump family or oppose them, whether you think the legal proceedings are legitimate or politically motivated, you cannot deny that what is happening matters and deserves careful attention. The media coverage in the coming days will be intense, and it will be important to distinguish between genuine reporting and speculation, between legal analysis and political commentary. As always, we encourage our viewers to seek out multiple sources of information and to think critically about what they read and hear. In an environment where narratives can be shaped and facts can be obscured, maintaining that critical perspective is more important than ever. We will continue to follow this story closely and bring you updates as new developments warrant. The Supreme Court's rejection of the appeal was not the end of anything. If anything, it was the opening of a new and potentially more dramatic phase of this ongoing saga. Melania Trump's response has ensured that this story will remain in the headlines, and George Will's analysis has provided a framework for understanding what it all means. In conclusion, what we witnessed today is a pivotal moment in an ongoing legal and political drama that has implications far beyond the individuals directly involved. The Supreme Court's decision to reject the appeal, while significant in its own right, was quickly overshadowed by Melania Trump's unexpected and aggressive response. Her decision to fight back, to open new legal fronts, and to promise revelations to come has transformed this story from one of defeat into one of continued resistance and uncertainty. George Will's thoughtful analysis reminds us that beyond the partisan reactions and the headline-grabbing developments, there are serious questions about constitutional law, institutional integrity, and the proper functioning of our democratic system at stake. If you found this breakdown helpful and informative, please take a moment to hit that like button. It helps our videos reach more people who are looking for in-depth coverage of the stories that matter. Drop a comment below with your thoughts on these developments. What do you think Melania's next move will be? Do you agree with George Will's analysis? We read every comment and love hearing your perspectives. And if you have not already, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you do not miss any updates on this developing story or any of the other important news we cover here. We are committed to bringing you thoughtful, detailed analysis of the events shaping our world, and we could not do it without your support. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next video.